Hey class, today we are going to learn about different types of lines. Those lines include parallel lines, perpendicular lines, and intersecting lines.
The objective for today, by the end of this video, you should be able to draw and identify parallel lines, perpendicular lines, and intersecting lines. So that is the goal by the end of today. The first type of lines are parallel lines. Parallel lines will never cross. No matter how far the lines extend and continue, they will never cross. Parallel lines are everywhere in our daily lives. Here are some great examples of things we may see in our everyday lives. A highway or road is considered to be parallel. It is considered to be parallel because the outside lines of the road will never intersect or cross. Even though other roads may cross paths with it, the outside lines of a road will never cross. A railroad track is also considered parallel because the outside tracks of the railroad will never cross as far as it continues. Like a highway, other railroad tracks may intersect with it, but the original railroad will never cross. Raise your hand if you have ever noticed this before. Can you think of other places you have seen parallel lines before? The next type of lines are perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines will cross to make right angles. And from previous lessons, we know that right angles measure 90 degrees. When these lines cross, it will form a perfect square corner. Imagine fitting a box perfectly in the corner where a perpendicular line crosses. Like parallel lines, perpendicular lines can be found everywhere in our daily lives. Here are some examples. This window shows perpendicular lines. Most wouldn't even notice these little tiny lines, but when you look at it closely, it shows lines that cross and make 90-degree angles. Another example would be the ceiling. The ceiling also shows perpendicular lines. The ceiling tiles cross and make 90-degree angles. Raise your hand if you can think of other places you have seen perpendicular lines before. The last type of lines are intersecting lines. Intersecting lines will cross, but they do not make right angles. They make more of a V shape. The angles that intersecting lines make will vary from big angles to small angles. When looking around, you may be able to spot intersecting lines just as often as parallel and perpendicular lines. A road map is a great example where you may see intersecting lines. On this particular road map, you can see that some roads cross but do not make 90-degree angles. Therefore, they are considered intersecting lines. Here is another example of intersecting lines. A student drew this on the board to show how lines can intersect but not make 90-degree angles. This is a great example of intersecting lines. Raise your hand if you can think of other places you have seen intersecting lines before. In conclusion, we have learned that parallel lines will never cross, perpendicular lines will cross to make right angles, and intersecting lines will cross, but they do not make right angles. And now, you should be able to draw and identify parallel lines, perpendicular lines, and intersecting lines.